Ryan, great to have you. I have a little bit of a loud intro here, but nothing to get you up and at 'em this after a lunchtime endeavor here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is cool. I do a podcast with one of my colleagues several years, but it's not video, and we certainly don't have any cool introduction. But now I want to go skiing.
Yeah, I know, right? We had to go for the very Montana Open,
I love
but
it.
yeah, we're really glad to have you here today. We've had some really good conversations over this last year. I've heard you speak at a few different conferences about a number of issues regarding banking and specifically debanking. But before we kind of dive in, I have a lot of questions for you. I kind of want to get into maybe some nitty gritty details and some high level overview as well. But if you just unpack your background, who you are, and how you kind of stumbled across this issue specifically.
Yeah, no. So my name is Ryan Haynie. I'm the vice president for legal affairs at the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs. So probably the easiest way to think of that is the people that are familiar with the Frontier Institute. We are the Frontier Institute in the state of Oklahoma. So we're the state's free market think tank. Started a little over 30 years ago in 1993, I believe. Started out as a traditional think tank, moved on to be like a do tank, and now we kind of think of ourselves as a battle tank.
Love that.
I've worn a number of hats over the years. I started my do with OCPA doing primarily criminal justice policy because my background is in law. I have a law degree from the University of Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner, and did some criminal defense work and sort of, I guess, got to appreciate sort of the civil rights act of criminal defense work and wanted to try to change some policies for the better there. And then over the years, my policy portfolio kind of grew. Now I'm hoping to grow into a primarily like a litigation center. So similar to like what our friends at the Pacific Legal Foundation are doing, or the Goldwater Institute. We want to represent Oklahomans whose rights have been violated by government in courts across the state of Oklahoma to try to vindicate those rights and, frankly, hopefully change the laws. But that is I bring that up because that's actually how I got into bank policy more broadly. But I came into banking policy through this debanking issue, and the reason is I am an allied attorney with the Alliance Defending Freedom. ADF or Alliance Defending Freedom is an organization that is public interest law, and they represent individuals who again have had their rights violated by the government. Now they focus primarily on religious liberty and First Amendment and that sort of thing. So you're from Colorado. You guys are familiar with Jack Phillips and the Masterpiece Cake Shop. They represented him. Represented in my neck of the woods, Hobby Lobby, when the Obama administration was trying to get them to cover contraceptives that they believed were abortifacient. So I believe in the work that they do, and I signed up to be an allied attorney, which essentially just means that if they have a case in Oklahoma or someone from Oklahoma calls them and they want the case, but they want maybe someone local to help out or for someone to kind of take point on that, then I can help out. And I was happy to do that and still do that. And I've worked with them on a couple of different cases, but I was at their convention, or I think they call it a summit, last summer. And one of the issues that was coming up from a policy perspective, not from the perspective of legal cases, was this issue of debanking.
Right.
And it kind of fits into maybe a broader conversation around corporations and their role sort of as, they have to protect free speech rights. Do they have to, do they have their own free speech rights and First Amendment rights generally? And what they were promoting was a law that they had passed in Tennessee, which was a debanking law. And it's been a long time since I've looked at that law. I probably should have looked at it before coming on here. But so the idea is they want to prohibit banks from being able to debank people. And we can define that here in just a sec. And that if the bank is going to do it, they have to give you sort of a reason, tell you why they did it. And that sounds, I think, pretty uncontroversial to a lot of people. But the more you think, it's like a lot of things, right? The more you think about it and the more you try to square the policy with your own principles. Sometimes you realize that there are some unintended consequences and that there's some pitfalls to that sort of thing. And I started thinking to myself, I think if they tried to pass something like that in Oklahoma, I would probably to that. I would probably not be in favor of that and try to like kill that bill.
Yeah.
So I started working. I started talking to some other people about it. One of our friends from within the Liberty Movement went to go work for J.P. Morgan Chase. Began talking to her about it. Sort of was able to, and then of course it's been something that has continued to be talked about by the Trump administration and by bank CEOs and all of that sort of thing. So long story short, that's kind of how I got to talking about it and to working on banking issues, including other issues like, interchange fees and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's how I came to work on this issue.
Yeah, it certainly seemed in the last few years, on the right specifically, debanking has kind of been a bigger issue. It's been definitely at the forefront of conversations. Would you kind of explain for our audience, maybe at first, maybe like a 30-second pitch of what the concept of debanking is? And then maybe we can dive into after that some specifics of how this came about. I know there's a long history going back to the Obama administration. So if you could maybe unpack on what even this topic is, be super helpful.
Sure. Yeah, no. Debanking, broadly speaking, is just the sudden closure of a financial services account. So we usually say debanking, but it also applies to things like insurance services and other financial services. Now, there's two different types, right? There is operational debanking, or what I call operational debanking, and that's when they close your account due to the fact that you have too many overdraft fees, or you're just no longer a customer that is profitable for that financial institution, and they close your account usually because of something you did. Right. And then I like to refer to the other type of debanking as governmental debanking. And that is when a bank debanks you for typically an ideological reason.
Yeah.
Whether conservative because you are a gun manufacturer, because you're a religious organization, what have you. Now, I think I probably gave it away a little bit. I think that is primarily driven by government and not the banks. It's not in their best interest to lose customers and to give up customers, but that there's an insidious governmental regulation aspect behind all of this. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's, yeah, you definitely, you said where we're headed with this, that a lot of the debanking comes from government, but, there's a couple phases to this going back in time. And I think it's important to hash out, like where I see today in the Liberty Movement, the right of center conversations is a split between what we should do about the concept of debanking, what's causing it. And I think it has bubbled up because of what's happened starting maybe in the Obama administration, maybe even earlier. Can you kind of go over like the history of where this happened? Is like Choke Point, any of those? Is that related to this conversation as well too?
Yes. So it actually goes back even further than the Obama administration. If you want to get to like the true roots of this, right? And so I think you have to start at least with the Bank Secrecy Act, which was passed in 1970. And that was an act that forced banks to keep records of large transactions done in cash. Right. So the idea was that we were going to essentially deputize banks to do the job of law enforcement. So DOJ, we want to catch these bad actors. We want to catch drug kingpins. We want to catch mob bosses and whatever. And so we're going to use the bank to do that for us, to help us in that endeavor. And so you have these, you have the beginning of what are called currency transaction reports. And if you are someone who maybe has mowed lawns, during the summer and it's sort of a cash heavy business, or you run any other kind of cash heavy business, you've been forced to fill out one of these or had a teller fill out one for you. Anytime you're dealing with over $10,000 in cash, whether you're making a deposit, or whatever, then they will fill out one of these currency transaction reports, and then that gets sent off to the government. And the idea is, obviously, like drug dealers and other illegal operations, whether it's prostitution or whatever, tend to be very cash heavy.
Right.
Arguably not anymore. I mean, I think it's only a matter of time, and we've seen this with like the rise of cryptocurrency and that sort of stuff. That's easier to hide, but you can sort of see where this was going. And these are called like know your customer, basically, right? So there's suspicious activity reports that also banks will file with the government, or send to the government if they feel like there's something suspicious. One of the things that they deem suspicious, by the way, is just the idea that you inquire about or don't try to get around filling out one of those currency transaction reports. So I always give this example because 3 lifetimes ago, I was a teller at a small community bank in Norman, Oklahoma. And there was a guy that came in, a real estate investor, and he had a bunch of cash he was depositing. I go to fill out the currency transaction, I'm filling it out, and he's sort of like asking me about it, and he's like, "Well, so how much can I deposit without having to fill one of these things out?" And of course, like what I wanted to tell this guy, because I knew who he was, I didn't know him, but his father-in-law is a very influential figure in Norman, Oklahoma. May have won a couple of national championships with the Sooners back in the 70s and 80s. And I wanted to tell him, like, look, man, don't ask these questions because that's only going to trigger another report.
More reports to do now.
Yes, exactly. Now the reality is, and you can imagine this, the federal government gets inundated with these things. There are so many of them, and most of them are never investigated. It does feel like an invasion of privacy. I totally get that, right? Nobody wants to have a form filled out about financial transactions that's then sent to the government, right? Like that feels very intrusive, and I understand when people don't want it. But the reality is, like, well over 99% of these things are never investigated. They never look into it, which kind of leads to the question, like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we forcing banks to continue to do this sort of thing? And then there are various customer identification programs that are also designed to sort of like get banks to sort of know, again, to deputize them to help root out illegal activity. And so it turns the idea that is innocent until proven guilty kind of on its head. And I don't know if you want to stop there, but that's where I would start with all of that information sort of in mind before we move into like Operation Choke Point and the Obama administration and how they were doing that.
No, I mean, that's great framing too. That's definitely important to know of, like, what are these laws that are triggering these things that happen that make conservatives, libertarians, anyone who's just worried about what the government's going to do with our data in the future, looking back, like, why are we doing this? It's like we're responding to this thing and we're creating a solution, but it's important to go back all the way. So if we jump forward now a little bit in time to, would you say the Obama administration is kind of the next milestone there of like taking advantage of that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously for years and years and years, we were doing all of this. These number laws existed for a long time. And, it was intrusive and it was a pain, but everybody kind of just dealt with it.
Right.
And then during the Obama administration, the Department of Justice started a program called Operation Choke Point. And the idea was that they were going to use information and use the banks to go after industries that they sort of disfavored. They started by going after online gambling sites.
Oh, interesting.
So like the online poker rooms that were really popular, sort of in that like the early 2000s to sort of the late 2000s or 2000 up to like 2010. I mean, I'm sure they're still popular, but back then it's like everybody I knew was in like poker, like online poker rooms at night.
Right, it's very popular.
Yeah, and so they started targeting those and they had some success. So then they sort of turned it on some other different industries as well. Some of them were totally lawful, like guns and payday lenders. Some of the industries they targeted are lawful but sleazy, right? So think about like pornography websites, or get rich quick schemes, that sort of thing. And then some of them certainly were illegal, but sort of going beyond like drugs and all that sort of stuff to like, the things where the cable boxes where you can sort of get cable for free or whatever,
Right.
and various different kinds of Ponzi schemes. So this was discovered. There was a ton of backlash from Congress. This was I don't want to say a big, but it was a part of the Tea Party movement, like the backlash. The Tea Party movement was very much opposed to sort of what the Obama administration was doing.
There's a few things they were opposed to, but this is definitely one of them for sure.
Absolutely right, and all of them good. And so that it was shut down. Of course, Trump gets elected in 2016. The DOJ shut down Operation Choke Point. During the first Trump administration, there was definitely a lowering of sort of like regulatory pressure on banks to close the accounts of gun manufacturers and pornography websites and like all these different things, right? So they went back. It's not as though the Know Your Customer laws that allow to do all of that in the first place went away. So we're still filling out all the forms that we talked about earlier,
right.
and presumably they were still using it to try to go after like drug traffickers and all that sort of stuff. But as far as the real weaponization to go after lawful activity, that basically stopped under the first Trump administration. And but then there was election in 2020. Republicans are now out of the White House, and Obama's vice president is now the president. We could argue about what level he was really running the show versus
someone was doing something, that's for sure.
Exactly. Well, and that's right. I mean, to the extent that like that administration was filled with a lot of the same people from the Obama administration, like it was basically like, well, let's get the band back together and let's do this, right? And so they called this. I don't know that they called it. They call it Operation Choke Point 2.0. And so this was basically the second bite at the apple. By now, though, what started off with, gun manufacturers and that sort of thing, if you just think about the difference like in so many ways, the Obama administration is like, it was terrible, but at the same time, it's like, in some ways we just long for that, right? Because after 2020, like the game had totally changed. It was no longer like leftists were no longer satisfied with going after the NRA and like Smith and Wesson, right? They want to go after everybody. They're like, we want to go after, conservative groups. We want to go after like Christians and Christian ministries and conservatives. And we want to basically force them to either like capitulate to our policy agenda or force them to like lose their accounts. So that's when you start to see more and more people be debanked for what certainly appear to be ideological reasons. We see missionaries who do missionary work, overseas debanked. We see, the president, Donald Trump was debanked.
Donald Trump was debanked.
There was a large effort to target the cryptocurrency industry. As you recall, crypto is a massive. Regardless of how you feel about it, it's a massive disruptor to sort of what I would call the inflationary industrial complex, right? So for a government that wants to print money and inflate money, the more and more people that adopt crypto, the less they can do that, right? Because there's no government oversight. They can't print more of it, right? It's done completely apart from government. So crypto was a big part of that. And of course, they wanted to promote central bank digital currency because that is something that they actually can control. Mm-hmm. So going after cryptocurrency was a huge part of Operation or Choke Point 2.0. So anyhow, what was happening over the years and through these two initiatives is they made banks more beholden to regulators and to government than they were to their customers, right? And so again, I sort of started off talking about it doesn't they don't benefit from losing customers. The bank, right?
Yeah, why would you want to lose your customer base?
Right. They're doing this
Especially if they're doing
because
things that are legal, you know?
exactly. They're doing this primarily, I believe, primarily because of woke regulators who are leaning on them to and they're using what I would consider illegal means to do so. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. For years and years, I mean, we want banks to be regulated. I think. I mean, there are people who don't want them to be regulated, and I'm open to all those arguments. But as far as having regulators go in and look at their capitalization rates, their assets, their management, their earnings, whether they're liquid, right? I mean, are they going to be able to satisfy customer deposits? All of those things are totally legitimate things. But then regulators started adding that I don't think you can find anywhere in law, although now it's prohibited by law, is sort of regulatory or reputational risk. Sorry. So
Right.
this is like, you as a bank need to consider your reputational route in the marketplace, which of course is absurd because the banks are already doing this. Why would you, like, nobody wants to have a bad reputation.
Totally.
What does that mean, right? It doesn't mean I have a reputation of not being liquid, or I have a reputation of bad financial management. It means I have a reputation of having bank accounts with the wrong people, right? So it's like I bank, the crypto industry, or I bank the gun industry, or I bank conservative Christians, right? And so that's how the regulators would sort of come out and do this, is sort of lean on the banks and say, hey, this. Let me go back. Let me use I think this is a good example. So the Christian missionary who's doing work in Africa who gets debanked, I'm sympathetic to that. Like I really am, and it certainly looks like it's ideological. Now there are some things about somebody who does work in Africa and is currently like moving money and resources between the United States and Africa that does frankly look suspicious, right?
And a lot of cash for that matter, like.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that does look suspicious. But the regulators are able to sort of like lock in on that and be like, hey, this looks kind of funny. These sorts of things look really funny. You should take a look at that. And then the banks are sort of like put between a rock and a hard place, right? They're like, well, do we just close we close this one account, and yeah, we lose that account and that stinks, but we got the regulator off our back.
Right.
Or do they say, you know what, like this, we talked to this, he's doing good missions work, he's feeding the poor, all these sorts of things. But then risk, a massive financial penalty because the regulator decided that the risk of sort of banking that customer was beyond. Later felt like it was good.
Well, I think we see this also with social media platforms during the Biden administration too. It's not the same thing, but kind of a corollary where you have this regulatory pressure, which I always like to remind, regulatory pressure is just government pressure. You have the United States government basically emailing executives or directly to social media platforms and also to banks too, the corollary there, and saying, hey, we think that you guys should be doing this. And when the United States government does that, people think really hard about what their actions are and be like, you know what, maybe I should just kind of do this. And I think most people in those circumstances would probably have some similar emotions. Does it make it okay? No. Does it make it what you want to do? No. It's counter to their incentives. Like, you don't want to lose customers, but also if the government's telling you to do something, like, yeah, it can be really tough. I can imagine being in a really tough place if that were me.
Yeah, no, that's right. And what I would say is that, at the same time that a lot of people on the right were making a big deal about this, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't make a big deal about it because it is a big deal. I just think their focus should be in the right place. And look, the president is really hit or miss on this issue. Like, I mean, sometimes he's really good on the issue and is addressing it head on. Other times he's just sort of like, he riffs. And so he's complaining about the banks, but then he'll tell you, in the same conversation, he'll be like, these banks, they're terrified of regulators. You bank CEOs, and they're just terrified of the regulators. So it's like he knows what's going on. He knows that they are kowtowing to pressure from regulators, and they are. I mean, and I'm with you. I mean, would it be great if look, like some of these banks are some of the largest corporations in the world. It would be great if they fought the government, but they're not what we are, right? Like you and I work for organizations that our job is to sort of like fight the growth of government, to fight government intrusion, to help people who are having sort of encroach on their personal liberties. That's our job. That's like not really a bank's job. So like to ask them to fight these battles on behalf of a handful or even 1,000 customers, it's a tall ask. Would it be great if they did it? It would be great. I mean, I would be more inclined to bank with a large bank if they did that sort of stuff. I mean, as it stands, I bank with a state chartered bank that operates sort of throughout the state, but doesn't operate in other states. I prefer sort of that community bank thing. But look, man, I'm just telling you, like, if Wells Fargo, well, the Wells Fargo is a bad example because they don't have branches in Oklahoma. But if like Citi or Bank of America or Chase like really decided to make this like their rallying cry, like I would consider opening an account there and banking with them. But I don't expect them to do it, I guess is the deal. So I'm sympathetic to both sides. I mean, I understand the people who are mad about it, but I also get from a financial standpoint, it's not always the lucrative thing to do to risk that.
And I think the other aspect here too is in this conversation among conservatives, it's like, well, we can say, banks or really any business for that matter should like stand up for kind of our beliefs. But I think it's important to remember the roles of different institutions in society. And it's so often, especially in today's modern setting, to be like, oh, well, this business is all just greedy, all about money or whatever. And it's just not the case, because more often than not, they're serving their customers. They're trying to meet needs sometimes that people don't even know they need. And I think Apple is a great example, like what they have done, and some other phone companies as well too. I don't want to just single anybody out, but I definitely think that they've met these needs for people, and I think that's good for society. I think these innovations and driving innovation forward is good in itself, and there's different roles. And so like for Frontier, our role is pushing back against the government, but to expect someone who's serving people and delivering mutually beneficial ends, I think it's not exactly fair to put on one entity or other. But I think maybe this kind of brings us into the next section too, which would be when I first started hearing, I kind of knew about this topic for a while, but when I first started hearing about it was actually when Mark Andreessen went on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, I think that was a big moment for folks. And he was talking specifically about crypto, but I had heard this like chatter among conservatives specifically. And maybe can you talk about like that and where did this go from being like, a small conversation to Joe Rogan to policy solutions that maybe led to the wrong results, if you will?
Yeah, well, so I want to address something else real quick, based on something you were saying before that question. And I don't want to let the banks totally off the hook. I want to make sure that we're being like open-eyed and like clear-headed about this. These large banks employ hundreds of thousands of people, and they don't all think like you and I do. And while most of them are not really political at all, or they're sort of apathetic, they don't have strong political beliefs one or the other. When you employ that many people, you're gonna have some bad apples and some bad actors and some people at those organizations that are more than happy to use to sort of allow the government to come in and debank the people that they don't like. Now, you would see them push back if all of a sudden we were like, hey, we want to debank like unions, right? Like, I mean, they'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. And they're all too happy to do it for. So I don't want to. I want to be careful because I think it's easy to. it's easy to be like, well, this is all government, and I think I said this at the beginning. What I want to say is that it's driven by government, and that there are some people who were all to go along for the ride.
Yeah.
And I think that's being fair to everybody. Not that I think it's important to always be fair. I like to tell my kids the fair comes in September. Yeah. So yeah, I think for a lot of people, the debanking thing first came to their mind on the Joe Rogan podcast with Mark Andreessen. That was about a year after it sort of entered my world through ADF, and so because they talked to individuals, obviously like people here and there were aware of it, and so they was sort of on their radar already, but I think it definitely blew up and to the point where I don't think the president would have talked about it much had it not been for the Rogan podcast with Andreessen. And of course, like you said, he was talking primarily about crypto and talking about some of the things that we were talking about earlier, where the government, the federal government, the Biden administration wanted to sort of quash cryptocurrency as we know it and sort of usher in this new government controlled cryptocurrency or central bank digital currency. And so whether or not that was on anybody's radar before Andreessen started talking about it, I don't know. It was a great interview. I mean, I encourage people to go watch it if they haven't. But I think all of a sudden you start to see, because of that, more and more of these bills pop up, like in Tennessee. To my knowledge, they're the only ones that have successfully passed one. But there have been, I think, others that have attempted. And, I think it's incumbent upon people like you and I to recognize the pitfalls that come along with a state level debanking, and then to talk about sort of what the trade-offs might be there, and then to highlight good legislation. I think it passed. I should know this, but it's been a while since I've thought about it. Tim Scott had a bill in Congress, and like I said, I think it passed, but I'm not totally sure, that would have gotten rid of that reputational risk aspect of the regulatory landscape that I was explaining a while ago. So that it basically said you cannot, regulators, and I think it applied to the FDIC, the comptroller of the currency, and the Federal Reserve. And it said you cannot, in regulating a bank, rely on reputational risk, which that's good policy, right? Because that actually gets at the root of what's going on. The fact that they sort of weaponize this regulatory framework that Frank's invented out of whole cloth. And so that's good. I think that the state level debanking bills, to the extent that they all kind of look the same, are probably not as well. They're well intentioned, but probably not as well thought out as maybe we would like to see.
So what is, something that I've heard, like what's so wrong with, if we're seeing this bad thing and we can't necessarily address the federal aspect, what's so wrong with a state, passing a bill that's like an anti-debanking bill? What are the pitfalls there, if there are any?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to see, love to have a system where states can lead on this issue. I wish we didn't have a Federal Reserve Bank. I wish that, it's like, I would love for that to be the case. But, I don't know if you guys say something akin to this at Frontier, but at OCPA, we always say we have to deal with the world the way it is, not with the way we wish it was, or wish it were. I don't know what grammatically, which is correct there.
Oh, sound good.
Yeah. Well, in any event, the fact that the federal government is already in this space and has been for decades now, makes it very difficult to comply with both a state and a federal law, especially when they conflict, right? So, for instance, these debanking laws say if you're going to debank somebody, you got to tell them why you debank them. Well, one problem with that is that the Bank Secrecy Act says you can't tell somebody why you debanked them. And the reason for that is kind of obvious. If you are debanking somebody because you believe that they are involved in illegal drug smuggling, or for that matter, human trafficking,
yeah,
if you tell them, hey, we debanked you because we think that you're trafficking children across the southern border, well, like now you've tipped them off, right? Like, and the government obviously does not want that. They don't want you to sort of know why you were debanked. So, you know, it creates yet another sort of untenable position for the banks to be in. Do we comply with this state law to the detriment of federal law? And then you've got sort of federal regulators breathing down your neck. Just go along with this federal law.
Yeah.
Another thing is, to the extent that it becomes workable, that you could, let's say you could find a workable solution through that one. Okay. The next thing I would say is a lot of the consternation over debanking is the what I would call like a general distrust of large corporate institutions now, right? So you brought up social media platforms a while ago and that sort of thing. You know, there's a massive distrust of those organizations or businesses, and then also like support large banks, especially since 2008, but even since 2018 has been a massive drop off. And so again, I already like put my priors out there. I prefer dealing with a small community, or not even a community bank, but like a state chartered bank where I get sort of a little bit more community feel, but it's still where I can have branches pretty much anywhere I go in the state. But the people that are going to have the companies that will have the easiest time complying with sort of a patchwork of state laws on this sort of stuff, where, you know, say, you know, Tennessee and Oklahoma and Montana all have debanking laws, but these other states don't, or we have debanking laws that we believe are protecting everybody, right, left, atheist, Christian, whatever. But then California has a debanking law that's frankly only protecting their people and is totally fine if you want to debank on the basis of, say, like religion, ever. The armies of lawyers that many of these companies have, these larger banks, they will figure out a way to make it work. But the smaller regional community banks are going to have a much more difficult time sort of threading that needle. And yeah. I think it leads to more and more I don't know what the word would be, but like where like the banks that many people seemingly hate the most will only get bigger and choke out some of the smaller mid-sized players. So I like an ecosystem where people have a ton of choices. I think people should have the choice between a small community bank, like a statewide bank, and then a big national bank that does business around the world. I think that's good for consumers, and it's best for us to have a bunch of choices. The last thing I would want to see would be us to have fewer choices because of the unforeseen realities of a regulatory scheme that only the largest banks can really comply with.
Yeah, certainly. Well, you know, I think maybe one of my last questions would be, is there better models to address this problem, or better solutions? Like, if people are concerned about this, is this, you know, more just a federal thing, state thing? Like, is there anything out there floating? There might not be. I really truly don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I wish I had looked to see if that bill from Tim Scott passed, because I do think that was a great piece of legislation. I don't know that there is a lot, you know, but the reality is when the NRA was, or wait, no, it was I'm gonna get some names and banks mixed up, but and so I'll use this for Ruger, the firearm manufacturer. They were debanked, and I can't remember which bank debanked them, but I think it was Bank of America. When they were debanked by Bank of America, they just went and opened an account with Wells Fargo, right? Like, at some level, you know, there are going to be banks that, for whatever reason, will decide not to do business with you. And I don't think it's the end of the world. It's an inconvenience for sure. I don't want to like minimize it necessarily. But just go to a bank that actually does want to do business with you. Is I think one of those solutions that we often overlook, which is, you know, the thing that I also think is important to say. Suppose the banks were totally bad actors in this, in the sense that they don't want to do business with people like you and me. Like as unsatisfying as it is for me to say this, they actually have that right? I mean, they have the same First Amendment rights that you and I have. You and I are allowed to associate with the people that we want to associate with and not associate with people that we don't want to associate with, right? So, I don't, a business that doesn't want to do business with somebody else for whatever reason. Now, I mean, we're starting to like fly in the face of like some civil rights laws and stuff that frankly, in
Right.
my
High
pride,
level philosophy.
yeah, but my priors are like I just think people should be able to do. I think people should be able to do business with whoever they want to, and those are private like agreements and contracts between two individual people, and the government shouldn't really have much to say about that. I get why that. Again, I'm admitting I understand that that is not a popular position necessarily, but I think it's important to note that, and so. But by the same token, we also have the ability to vote with our dollars and with our, we talk about voting with our feet, but we have the ability to vote with our dollars as well. And so if you see that, you see a story about somebody that you really like who was debanked or they lost their insurance, I think it's worthwhile to say like, to just more like I don't want to do business with them either. Like I have the right to take my business somewhere else. And I think we can just all respect each other's abilities to go and do business with the people that we want to do business with and not with the people that we don't.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I would add to that too is something that we talk about again and again and again at Frontier is that to us at least, what it comes down to is who is the original person kind of pushing some of these things. And if someone doesn't want to do business with me because I'm rude, or something like that, that's understandable. But I'll tell you what, if it's government pushing these things, I have a big issue with that. And I think that's when you start to go, well, the goal shouldn't be then to create more laws to give government more power to look over things. It should be pulling that away from government and saying we're going to government out of the equation so that people can freely associate with who they want.
No, that's right. And we say very similar things at OCPA. People have rights, governments have powers. The government does not have the power to, they technically do have the power because they exercise it all the time, but I don't actually given them the power to step in between arm's length transactions between individuals. I don't think that's a proper power, I should say, of the government. People absolutely have the right to not do business with people that they don't want to. And so that's a distinction that, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that is an important distinction that we talk about a lot at OCPA as well.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate your time today. I'll give you, is there anything else that people can go and learn more about this? Or is it just kind of keep listening to your guys' work? How can they find out about you maybe?
I publish not frequently, but from time to time at ocpathink.org. Most of the information you're going to find there's going to be very specific to Oklahoma. But I'm trying to think who else has done. I know like the Cato Institute has done some good work on debanking. So, you can probably do some keyword searches through their website if this is something you're really interested in. And I'll try to send you some stuff. I don't know if you have like a show notes section or whatever, but
You can add that on. Sure.
okay, cool. But yeah, I mean, and I think, like I said, like you brought up earlier, I think going and listen to that Joe Rogan podcast with Andreessen is really helpful as well to kind of get yourself up to speed on what this is all about and kind of what's driving it.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate your time. I'll let you get back to your day here. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you on soon.
All right, man. Thanks so much, and it's good to see you again.
Yep. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye.